All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about the year 1903. Now, you might think, why 1903? Well, think of it like this. This single year is basically the blueprint for the entire 20th century. It was this incredible moment of soaring optimism and just gut-wrenching disaster all at the same time. A year of breakthroughs that would change the world, which nobody noticed, and horrific tragedies that everybody saw.
And to really wrap your head around 1903, you just have to look at one month, December. In the final days of the year, the whole world was glued to the news of this horrific fire in a Chicago theater. But just 13 days before that, an event that would completely redefine what it means to be human happened, and it was met with pretty much total silence. And that, right there, is the paradox of 1903.
So yeah, this year of contradictions, of incredible progress slammed right up against terrible peril, it really does set the stage for the century to come. Let's dig in and see how.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the good stuff, the roar of progress. In 1903, America was just buzzing with this incredible energy. You've got Teddy Roosevelt in the White House, the country is feeling confident, powerful. It really felt like absolutely anything was possible.
And wow, just look at this timeline. It really shows you how fast things were moving. From the toys our kids play with, to the cars we drive, to our national pastime, and even our place on the global stage. Massive foundational changes were all happening within months of each other. The pace was just relentless.
And this progress wasn't just some abstract idea happening far away. It was stuff you could actually buy, stuff that was showing up in people's homes. The teddy bear, named for Roosevelt himself, becomes this instant childhood classic. For just a nickel, you could get a box of Crayola crayons. And if you had a cool $850, you could be one of the very first people to own a Ford Model A.
And what about entertainment? Well, 1903 gave us the first ever World Series. It was this gritty 9-game showdown between Boston and Pittsburgh that just captivated everybody. This wasn't just about a few ball games. This was the birth of professional sports as this massive, unifying cultural force in America. Meanwhile, on the world stage, President Roosevelt was, he was playing hardball. It was all about his big stick diplomacy. When Colombia turned down a treaty for a canal, the U.S. basically just helped Panama have a revolution. A few days later, the brand new nation of Panama signs a treaty giving America control of the canal zone forever. It was an incredibly bold, aggressive move that really cemented the U.S. as a major world power.
But for all this incredible progress, all this ambition, there was a really dark side, a terrifying one. The very things that made the era so exciting, these new technologies, enormous new buildings, they came with a catastrophic human cost, when that ambition got way ahead of safety. A perfect example of this, the brand new Iroquois Theater in Chicago. It had just opened its doors in November. It was lavish, it was beautiful, and it was advertised with one crucial, and as it turns out, fateful promise: absolutely fireproof.
And then, on December 30th, during a packed afternoon show, that promise was completely shattered. A fire broke out. 602 people died. At the time, it was the deadliest single-building fire in all of American history.
So you have to understand, this wasn't just a random fire. It was a complete and total system failure. It starts with a tiny spark from a stage light. But then, the so-called fireproof curtain, which was supposed to drop down and contain it, gets snagged. The smoke vents that were meant to pull the fire and smoke up and out of the theater, they'd been sealed shut. And worst of all, the fire exits were an absolute death trap.
And the scene inside, it was just pure horror. This was a matinee show, so the audience was full of women and children. In the panic, they rushed to doors that were locked, or even worse, doors that opened inwards, making them impossible to push open against the force of a crowd. They found bodies piled 10 feet high. But here's the thing. Out of that unimaginable horror came a legacy we all benefit from today. Building codes all over the country were rewritten, mandating things we now take for granted, like panic bars and doors that always swing out. And this all brings us right back to that central contradiction of 1903. Because while the entire world was, and rightly so, horrified by the Iroquois fire, it was completely missing another story, a really quiet event that would have an infinitely greater impact on the future of humanity.
Just look at these two events side by side. The difference is absolutely staggering. The fire got massive, global headlines. The first flight? Barely a whisper. met with skepticism. The public was shocked and demanded reform after the fire, but was pretty much indifferent to the idea of flight. The media knew how to sell a story about death and disaster, but it had no idea how to report on a quiet revolution.
See, just 13 days before that massive fire, on a windy beach down in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville Wright flew for 12 seconds. That's it, 12 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, right? But it was the first time in the history of the world that a human had flown a powered, controlled, heavier-than-air machine. The world changed forever in those 12 seconds.
And what did the media do with this world-changing news? Well, they completely fumbled it. The few papers that even bothered to run the story got almost everything wrong, just inventing details and totally missing the point. As Orville Wright himself put it, the very first story was 99% wrong.
So why? Why the massive disconnect? Well, back in 1903, the press ran on immediate, sensational spectacle. A theater fire is easy to understand, right? There's tragedy, there's drama, there are villains and heroes. But a 12-second flight? That's abstract, that's technical. Its real meaning was too huge to grasp in a single headline. The media was simply built to cover a crisis, not a paradigm shift.
Okay, so when we put it all together, what do we take away from this wild, contradictory, and honestly crucial year? Well, 1903 pretty much wrote the script for the modern world we live in.
At the end of the day, 1903 gave us these big tensions that we are still dealing with. We're still wrestling with that tug of war between moving fast and staying safe. We're still struggling to see the really revolutionary changes happening underneath all the noise of the daily headlines. And so much of our modern culture, from the brands we buy to the sports we watch, you can trace its DNA right back to this one year.
And all of this, really, it leaves us with one big question for ourselves. Back in 1903, the world was focused on the fire and completely missed the flight. It makes you wonder, as we're scrolling through our own endless feeds of crises and spectacles, what are the quiet, world-changing revolutions that are happening right now, completely unnoticed by almost everyone